So I posted an update in the Corneal Neuralgia Facebook group yesterday saying that I was doing much better with my condition using a variety of mind-body techniques, and I got a lot of questions about that in the comments. And so rather than writing out a really lengthy, boring wall of text that Facebook isn't going to format properly, I thought I'd document it here in video format, and that way it's easier for people to consume. If looking at screens is painful and whatnot, you can just listen to the audio. And so my corneal neuralgia journey started about 3.5 years ago, sort of summer of 2021. I started to get symptoms by let's say November. It was really bad. Like I couldn't really drive at night and that kind of thing. I work as a software developer, so work was extremely challenging. I kind of roughly managed to keep it together through the pain, but it definitely hindered my career. And I'm a freelancer, so I can to some extent choose when I work, but it really limited me in terms of the hours I could work. I do have dry eyes. Tear breakup time is maybe 3 to 5 seconds, something like that. Although I don't think that actually has much to do with my condition, and I'll get into why in a minute. I tried probing. I've tried all kinds of eye drops. I've tried punctal plugs. None of those have provided any sort of long-term relief. I've tried a whole variety of diets. I tried vegan, carnivore. I've tried lots of exercise. I've tried red light therapy. I've tried a lot of different things. And so that's basically how things went for about a good at least 2.5 years, just trying these different things, going to different doctors, ophthalmologists. All of them said there's basically nothing wrong with my eyes. They're perfectly healthy, just a mild sort of dryness. That's where I was at, and yet the pain I was feeling was extremely significant, affected my career, etc., etc. And then about November last year, so November 2023, I first read the book The Way Out by Alan Gordon. That was my first time reading through it, and it's a reference that I'd highly recommend if you're dealing with chronic pain. It's very helpful in understanding how it works, and that was probably the second interaction I'd had with this idea that not all pain is purely due to damage to the body. Because during this 3-year period, I'd go to all these doctors. The doctors would tell me that there's nothing wrong, but I was still feeling pain. And my idea at the time was that pain can only happen if there is damage to the body. And so if that is a law that you've laid down, then the only logical conclusion of that is that the doctor's wrong, basically. So that's what I thought. I thought, these doctors are missing something. There's got to be something wrong. And so I spent a lot of time and a lot of money on various blood tests and whatnot. That was my sort of second ever interaction with this idea that pain could be psychological in nature. I'd read John Sarno's work previously when I had back pain in the past. I found his work a lot harder to understand. He doesn't tend to, it's not as plain English as Alan Gordon and Alon Zev's The Way Out. So I read that in November of 2022, and then I tried the techniques for a while, and then I ended up in a stressful situation with work, and I kind of just I kind of forgot about it. I lost faith in the idea that it could be psychological. I pretty much tried it for a while and then stopped. And as a result, I didn't get any significant benefits from it. But the idea sort of stuck in the back of my head. And so as this year, 2024, went on, I looked at more and more resources. So I started looking at Howard Schubina's stuff. He's a doctor in the US, and he's written a book called Unlearn Your Pain, which I would highly recommend. And there's also a few interviews with him on YouTube, and there's a free Coursera course on how pain works, which I would also really recommend. So listening to those two books, or at least I listened to The Way Out and I read Unlearn Your Pain. Reading those two and listening to the stories that they told and their reasoning behind it strengthened this idea for me that it could very well be some sort of psychosomatic or neuroplastic, whatever you want to call it, not physical damage to the neurons, to the nerves in my eye, rather some kind of learned response due to emotional factors, whatever. And so I started to explore this idea more and more going into the summer of this year. There's another great book called From Paralysis to Fatigue by Edward Shorter. That's a history book. It's not really like a guide into, how to specifically fix your condition. But the thing I found really interesting about it is how common and how varied the symptoms can be from these psychosomatic conditions. He looks through, various different cases of, some really wild things like people believing that animals lived inside them, and the doctors would have to do some crazy stuff to convince the patients that that they'd gotten rid of it. All kinds of weird beliefs that people used to have, which caused real symptoms. People would actually be paralyzed or, actually have pain, etc., etc. But there was no physical cause for it. There was no damage to the body that prevented them from moving or that caused the pain. And so I got to August this year, and I decided I'd looked at all of these resources that I've told you about, all these books, different interviews, etc. Listened to the Tell Me About Your Pain podcast with Alan Gordon. Looked up some stories online, etc. And one of the activities that you're encouraged to do as part of Alan Gordon's The Way Out is to assemble an evidence sheet. So that is a list of evidence that would point to the idea that the pain is neuroplastic. And so for me, that might look something like, I've been checked out by lots of different doctors. I've done all the scans, so that there's no, tumor or anything. My vision hasn't changed at all. All of these various things. And then you can look at what makes it worse. So for me, the pain was always worse when I was in some sort of emotional state. So let's say a dog was barking outside. I'm trying to concentrate on my work. That would always make the pain worse. Something else like the pain would get worse immediately when looking at a phone screen. Whereas you would expect with dry eye, it would be something where, over a period of time, hours and hours potentially, that the eyes would get progressively more painful, whereas I was experiencing the pain instantly, which to some extent points to the idea that that this is a learned response rather than actual damage being done to the body. An interesting thing that happened to me actually is I got an e-ink monitor, so it doesn't emit any light at all. And what I noticed is that sometimes when that would change from black to white, I would have that pain response. I would recoil from it, even though there's no light being emitted. When you change from a black to a white background on an LED screen, you get that big flash of light. You don't get that on an e-ink screen, and yet I had that same response. That was very weird, and to me that made me think that this could be a conditioned response rather than some physical damage to my body. Let's have a look. See, I have a full list here. So, neuroplastic pain proof. Yeah, so I didn't feel the pain as much when I was doing something fun. So if I was playing a video game, for example, it tended to be a lot better, especially if I was really immersed in it. In fact, I had this experience maybe 6 months into having the pain. So, I was really upset. I was struggling to work. I came home to my parents for Christmas, and I was just depressed about this condition, and so I spent about 10 hours a day for about over a week anyway, playing this game called Dyson Sphere Program, and it's a very addictive game. And I just didn't care that the pain was happening. I was still getting pain, but I just didn't care about it. I was just like, I don't care. I'm just going to play this game. And the weird thing that happened was, after about a week, my eyes improved a lot. I thought I was cured. And then I go back to where I was living, and then my symptoms start to decline again. So I come home, I immerse myself in this game for a week, and somehow that genuinely creates a massive improvement over the course of 2 weeks. And then I go back to where I was living, and I suddenly start getting worse and worse and worse and worse again. Now, at the time, I thought that was a physical cause, so I tried to replicate the exact environment, the temperature in the room, the screen I was using. I tried to replicate everything about that environment, and I could never replicate it. Now I believe the reason for that is because I was so immersed in the game. It was like a meditative experience where the mind relaxes. You're not thinking about work or any stressful topics, things like that. That's why I now believe that was so effective for me. So I had that experience, and that was another piece of proof for me that made me really think that this could be psychological in nature. Another thing that made me think that it could be psychological was the fact that I'd had chronic pain before. So my whole life, really, I'd had this thing where, in my mind at least, I never recovered from injuries, or I would be very slow to recover from injuries. So, I hurt my knee doing judo, landed on it when I was maybe 15, and that took seemingly years and years to get better. And it gave me tremendous pain, sometimes even worse than when it had started. So I had that. And I had really bad back pain in university. And I did kind of mildly tweak it doing weightlifting, but the amount of pain I was experiencing from my back, it was like, it was terrible. It was like someone, it was just such a ridiculous amount of pain for the smallest. I hadn't broken my back. I was fully functional. It was just a pain thing. And so, and then that went away after, I had these painful experiences during times of stress in my life. And then they went away after some period of years and intermittently reoccurred. And so for me, that was another sign that, probably that this could be a psychosomatic condition because, I'm a young guy, I'm relatively fit and healthy. It's unlikely that I have all these physical conditions going wrong with me that's causing all this tremendous pain. I just thought it was more likely that it was a psychosomatic condition, which is actually very common. Lots of people have them, as demonstrated in that history book, from paralysis to fatigue. It's very common throughout history. And so eventually, there's 1,000 other little details I can go on about every single piece of evidence that I came up with that pointed to me having a psychosomatic condition, but would be here all day. So anyway, at some point I decided, on August 8th of this year, I decided that the pain was psychosomatic. I made a firm decision. Now, I did that before, actually, back in November of last year, but then I sort of lost my conviction. I decided that the pain was psychosomatic and that I was largely going to ignore the other treatments that I'd been considering. So I'd been, doing eye drops and eye masks and all this stuff. For me, they didn't really improve the situation that much when I was using them. And so getting rid of them, I thought, wasn't much of a risk. I could always go back. If I try this for a long time and it doesn't work, I can always go back. And so the initial steps that I took was to first stop. The first thing I did was I stopped consuming anything that would, or doing anything that would raise my stress levels in general. So I stopped, participating in social media. I stopped following the Corneal Neuralgia Facebook group. There's just a lot of people in there who are going through a lot of pain. And if you're reading that every day, for me at least, that made me more anxious about the condition. And, I think, if all these people are having all these problems, then how am I going to ever become cured, etc., etc. And so I stopped paying attention to all that stuff. I stopped watching the news. I stopped paying attention to that completely. I replaced all of my media with, something lighthearted or comedic. So I went through a lot of SpongeBob episodes. That was the first thing I did, and I also took time away from work. So I'm privileged to be in a position where I can live at home with my parents, and I can take time off work. And so that was the initial steps. I just wanted to reduce the level of alertness in my mind. So this is a big theme in Alan Gordon's book, is that he believes that this neuroplastic pain is caused by a high level of alert in the brain. And so the brain perceives danger where there's no actual danger, and this creates the pain. So I wanted to try and lower the overall levels of pain in my body. The overall levels of alertness, which would hopefully lower the levels of pain. Okay. So that was the first step. Kind of just stop allowing these stressful external stimuli to get me all agitated and anxious. Prior to this, I would get so worked up about small things I read on the news, or just different things like that. So I just stopped doing that. Next step was to find, kind of at the same time, I started some new hobbies. So my mindset sort of last year, so let's just say prior to this summer, was that because there's something wrong with my eyes, I needed to just sit inside and rest them and just close my eyes and do work when I needed to and just get through that. So, just grit my teeth and get through it. But otherwise, I should basically just not use my eyes at all, and I should be, careful about, going outside. If there's headlights shining in my eyes, that could do damage to my eyes, etc., etc. That was the mindset I was in, because again, I believed there was something physically wrong with my eyes, and that if I encountered a really bright light, that would set me back in my healing for days and days and days. That's what I believed. But since I'd came to this conclusion that it was psychological, there was no physical damage, I decided to start, getting out again, and because I'd basically just sat in my room for about a year and not done much other than some occasional, some freelancing. So I started getting some hobbies. I started kickboxing and I started dancing. It was very interesting actually, because during the kickboxing sessions, it's pretty tough on the old cardio, and so we would be doing something like different combinations, or maybe just lots of burpees or something like that. And with that kind of exercise, you get to a point where nothing else in the world exists. You're just one-mindedly focused on the next rep. And one very interesting thing I observed was that my pain completely went away during that time. I would just notice that, oh, I don't have any pain. That was just a little aside. So yeah, I started kickboxing just for general health, but also mental well-being in terms of I find now that if I don't go to kickboxing for a week, I get really anxious, and I don't feel good, and my eyes do actually start to get a bit worse due to that, I believe. So yeah, I found some hobbies that I enjoy, and dancing's really fun. I do swing dancing. That gets me out, meeting people, having a social life again. I found that to be really nice, and it's a very silly dance, so there's lots of laughter and very strange things. So that was good as an activity to calm the mind, both of them in combination, to calm the mind, get it out of this high alert state. That's what I believe anyway, and I found them really helpful. So I do those now as my main hobbies several times a week. It keeps me busy as well, so I'm not fully recovered, and I certainly wasn't back then. So a few months ago, I was working maybe 1 or 2 hours a day max, and so you're left with a lot of free time at that point, where you're just sitting about. And so having these hobbies gave me something to do, and my eyes didn't, I was relatively okay. My main problem with my eyes was with screens. That was my main problem. So when I was doing, one of these activities, my pain would be relatively low or at a medium level, certainly not severe or something that would stop me doing these exercises. So that was the next part of the regime that I brought in. And then after that, I started meditating. Now, I would say this has been after just deciding that the pain was psychological. This is probably the next most important thing. I started out just doing 5 minutes a day. I've built up now. I do 40 minutes twice a day. And what it allowed me to do is to observe my thoughts and psychological processes. And so one of the main preconditions or sort of things that commonly occur with chronic, psychosomatic symptoms in general, is emotions like anxiety and depression. Now, I don't look or act like someone with anxiety, but after a good amount of meditation, I was able to realize what I was thinking about, and that I didn't need to do that, and how it was causing me anxiety. So just to give an example, probably twice a week, I would wake up, and first thing on the morning, I'm in bed still, I would go into some, detailed analysis of how I would react if my wife cheated on me. And so I would really imagine the situation. I'd imagine I'm in that situation. I'm having a very intense argument. There's things being thrown around. There's lots of bad things being said. And then I would go over infinite variants of this and how what would I do if this happened and this happened and this happened. And now I realize I sound like a crazy person because I don't have a wife. I don't even have a girlfriend. And so this situation is, it's just not something that's relevant to my life. And so I was able to observe that, firstly, I was actually thinking about these things, because I think sometimes we get into these thought processes and we don't realize we're even doing it. And then secondly, I was able to realize that just thinking about these things was creating a lot of anxiety in my body. About the thing with professional athletes, that they often imagine the activity and that gives them an advantage. And part of the reason for that is that the body, the mind, it struggles to tell, between these imagined and the real situations. And so if I was constantly imagining all these stressful things happening, that was putting my body on high alert all the time. And so it's no wonder that I was having, all these different psychosomatic conditions. Yeah, so I was able to observe these thought processes. Another good one that I've just remembered is, so obviously, if you're light sensitive, then driving at night with other headlights coming at you is going to be a little bit painful. And so what I would do is I would get so angry at people for having their headlights on. Even it's a relatively, it's a sensible thing to do, is to keep your headlights on at night. But if someone was in a very high up car, so the headlight, I've got a small car, so the headlights would be shining directly in my eyes, I would get so worked up and angry about this, because it was causing me the pain. And again, I was in this mindset of believing that pain meant damage. So the headlights were causing damage to my eyes, and these people were being irresponsible by having bright headlights, etc., etc. And so I was working myself up into into quite the rage about this every time I'd go out driving at night. And there's a million other situations like that, of just being irrational. Meditation really helped me to understand when those situations are happening, and most of the time now I can sort of, you see how silly it is, basically. And so those are the main things I've been doing. I've been doing somatic tracking, which I think is very useful. That's again in Alan Gordon's book. Basically, when the pain is there, or discomfort is there but not too severe, what you do is you just pay attention to it. And if if you completely believe that the pain is purely psychological and you genuinely have conviction in that, you're a lot less worried about the pain or the feeling. It doesn't bother you as much. You're just like, oh, that's weird. That's quite interesting. If you're genuinely convinced that there is nothing wrong, and therefore that these symptoms can't harm you in any way, that there's nothing bad that can come from it, it becomes just interesting or fun or even like a game. And so I would strongly recommend practicing somatic tracking. I find it really helpful. That's the main set of things that I do. I don't use any eye drops anymore. I still have my plugs in. I plan on getting those removed at some point. I don't use any eye drops. I don't do eye masks. I don't do anything physical with my eyes. I don't take any supplements. I don't adjust my screen. I use a normal LED screen now. I don't use the e-ink one anymore. The light bulbs in this room, at one time I had them, to these very low power, very red lights, because I thought that white light was hurting me. These are just regular light bulbs now. I've tried to just live completely normally, as if there is nothing wrong with my eyes. Again, for me, it's a psychological thing to try and get into that mindset of there being nothing wrong. I don't avoid going out into social situations much anymore. I don't avoid driving at night. Unless the pain is very severe, I don't limit myself at all. I'm still only working part-time as a programmer. I'm working about 4 hours a day right now. But I wouldn't say I really have pain as such anymore. There's some level of discomfort sometimes that comes and goes. Sometimes when I'm on a computer, sometimes not at all. There's some level of discomfort and different feelings. And what is interesting actually is how the feelings have changed over time. So the initial symptoms 3 years ago, it was the cold menthol sensation that people will describe about having cold in your eyes. It's changed a lot over the years. Now, mainly when I get symptoms, it's more of like a headache in this region or nose pressure, like someone's really pressing on my nose. I don't get much eye sensation at all, which is, again, for me at least, that is another sign that there's nothing actually wrong with my eyes. And so, yeah, I'm working part-time, working 4 hours a day right now. It's been almost exactly 4 months since I started this routine. I'm pretty convinced at this point that my pain is purely psychological, neuroplastic, psychosomatic, whatever you want to call it. I never had laser eye surgery. I never had anything wrong with my eyes. I took Accutane when I was younger, but other than that, nothing to do with my eyes. And like I said, I do have mildly dry eyes. I suspect I'll always have mildly dry eyes. I don't think that was the driver for me for this condition. I fully expect to be back to normal life, working full time, sometime in the next year or so. We'll see. It's made a big difference in my outlook, in that, maybe 6 months ago, my opinion was that I will be disabled for the rest of my life, and that I'm not going to be able to work, that I'm going to have to retrain as some other profession, and just struggle through. But now I've already seen such incredible improvements in such a short amount of time, 4 months, that I can see the path to being completely and fully cured and not having any symptoms. Just to give you a reference, 4 months ago when I started this, I would watch half a SpongeBob episode, so that's about 10 minutes, and I would be in enough sort of pain to completely stop and go for a lay down. That was kind of where I was at. And even sort of last year, I had this period where I stopped working to try and focus on it and to figure out what was wrong. And even the LED on my mouse would cause me to be in so much pain that I had to lay down with the blindfold on and just listen to an audiobook. So that's like where I've been in terms of pain levels. And right now I'm looking at this LED screen for the last 45 minutes, an hour while I've been preparing it. And relatively, there's something there. There's a little bit of a sensation there, but I wouldn't call it pain. And I mean, I expected today to be a bit worse because I haven't slept properly for a few days, and anything which is likely to upset you or make you more irritable emotionally. For me, that tends to bring on the symptoms more, which is again another sign that it's probably psychosomatic. And so yeah, I think that's everything I've got to say right now. This is month 4 of my journey. I started August 8th of this year. In terms of healing through a mind-body technique or understanding. If you like these, let me know. I'll make more, maybe one at 6 months, one at 8 months, etc. Just to let you know how I'm doing, if there's anything different I'm doing. And yeah, hope you like it. I'm excited to see what you think.